Hey everybody, welcome to Freeology Friday. My name is Aaron Tomlinson, and he is.
I am Derrick Day. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
You know, I'm a little exhausted. It's been a
Mhm.
long week.
Yeah,
Lot has happened. Good, bad, and ugly. so I'm happy to be here, man. It's good to see you.
thank you. It's great to see you. What are you drinking tonight?
Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh yeah.
Just this is what Michelle had. I'm at my sister's house, and this is what she had on deck. Fun fact: she and I, uh, we were up till like 6 o'clock in the morning playing cards and talking.
Oh nice.
And we did the inventory. We drank 3 bottles of Merlot last night between the
Oh
two of
man.
us.
All
So
right. That's good.
yeah,
So going a little lighter tonight. So
yeah.
I took a page from you, but I'm gonna have to. It got warm. I'm gonna have to go get some ice. So I'm gonna duck out here in just a second. But I've got
Yeah.
lamb juice, just good old Mr. T's.
There you go. Never go wrong with Mr. T's. I pity the fool.
And then I added Pablo chili beer. So
Oh, wow.
michelada.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so I like this. I've drunk this. It's about the only beer I drink.
Yeah.
I don't drink a lot of beer. Um, so it's craft beer from my hometown. I was buying it today, and the lady tells me, you got to keep that refrigerated. And I said, yeah. And then I'm, running the card and whatever. I'm like, well, I just keep it refrigerated. What do you mean you have to keep it refrigerated? And she says it's not pasteurized.
Mm,
So,
interesting.
yeah. So Pueblo's not known for a lot of things. We're known for our weed. Supposed to grow really good marijuana. 60 Minutes
Yeah.
did a special on us, called us the Napa Valley of marijuana. And our Pueblo chilies, they're a distinct type of chili that farmers grow here.
Mm.
And so, yeah. So, but it's probably pretty good, but it's kind of warm. So, I'm going to introduce the topic. How about that? And then when I pitch it over to you, I'm just going to run right over there, and get some ice.
Over there, right there.
So I'm excited about today's topic, something that we've talking about for probably a couple of years.
Yeah.
And that is the topic of chaos magic. And so I'm going to introduce that. I'm going to assume this is probably a new topic to most of the people that watch us, if not to everybody that watches us. If that's not the case, I would be surprised, because not a lot of people know anything about chaos magic.
Yep.
But one of the things I did, I guess I was really rebellious as soon as I started to deconstruct. I mean, within a few months, I started to explore other spiritual paths, right?
Yep.
And so the first thing not the first thing, but one of the first things I started looking into was the occult. And we were taught all kinds of shit about what the occult is, what the occult was. And I don't know about you, Derrick, but when I was my entire life as a Christian, if somebody said they were into the occult or mentioned the occult,
Mm-hmm.
I might, think of Aleister Crowley, because he's probably the most famous occultist of all time.
Yep.
And he went, he fancied himself as the great beast, which is an interesting story in and of itself. And I thought occultism was basically devil worship, right? I thought it was sacrificing chickens. I thought it was worshiping the devil, doing malevolent, evil things out there. I could think of people like Mike Warnke, who's a friend of mine on Facebook, just mentioned that, who, testified that he was a high priest in some satanic group. But other people out there, especially in the satanic panic of the late 80s, early 90s, when I was paying attention to this stuff. Before that, I wasn't paying attention. And so you have all these Christians that say, well, I was the highest ranking occultist you could be. I was the highest ranking Freemason you could be, whatever. And they would talk about how, they were worshiping Satan. With some guy, I did a thing around Halloween for my own channel about this guy going around saying, You know, if you let your kids celebrate Halloween or you celebrate Halloween, you are cheating on Jesus.
Mm.
And then he talked about how he was really high up in the occult and occult orders and stuff like that. So that was kind of the frame that I had, that it was all dark, all evil, intentionally malevolent, had elements of Satan worship and things like that. So when I began to study it and look into it, one of the first books I picked up was a book from Israel Regardie, who was a disciple of Aleister Crowley. And then, you know, Aleister Crowley got his start in Magick with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was a magical lodge, secret magical lodge, magical group in the late 1800s there, whatever, you know, that sort of that time frame is. I think William Yeats was a member of the Golden Dawn. I think Bram Stoker was a member of the Golden Dawn. I thought it was all satanic. So I open up Israel Regardie's book to read it. And I'm like, holy shit. I get a couple chapters in there and I realized they are more religious and Christian than I was. That the entire Western occult tradition grew up from the Renaissance period in a Christian time frame. The tarot cards are inherently, they are hermetic, but they are filled with Christian imagery and Christian ideas. Dion Fortune, who was also part of the Golden Dawn around the same time as Aleister Crowley and Israel Regardie, she ended up becoming a devout believer. Not that she never was. So what I began to see and researching this and studying this from the Renaissance, people like Cornelius Agrippa, John Dee, these guys were all high-ranking like priests or wannabe priests that did not do anything in the occult remotely related to Satan or satanic worship. And they were more morally rigid, because remember now, Aleister Crowley and you know, all these guys, it's a Victorian period.
Yeah.
And so part of what Aleister Crowley was doing was pushing back against Victorian Puritanism or Puritanism or whatever, however we want to say that. But not everybody that was in the occult was like that. And so fast forward a couple months and I have a chance to meet one of the really top occult teachers from Europe. And so religious, man, so religious. I was like, man, this would make the Baptists blush. This would make the Catholics jealous, you know? And so I didn't spend a lot of time with that. I didn't mess with that much. A lot of it's based on Jewish Kabbalah, but a Christian version of the Jewish Kabbalah. And Christ is central to the magical system, as well as the archangels that are more honored, you know, in Catholic traditions and Orthodox traditions, like Michael and Raphael and Gabriel and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I didn't fuck with that much. But I was blown away. I was like, we have just been lying and we have been lied to when we tell people what, you know, from the Christian perspective, what the occult is all about. And it's not hard. It's not hard to find. So fast forward a little bit. You have, well, not fast forward yet. One of Aleister Crowley's disciples was a guy named Austin Osmond Spare. And Austin Osmond Spare was an artist. And he became interested in magic, but he didn't have any use for the religious parts of it. He didn't have any use for the ritual parts of it, the secret parts of it, all of that stuff. So he's the first guy that came up with the idea of sigils. And I'll explain what a sigil is in a minute. And then fast forward to, you know, kind of the 60s era, and Aleister Crowley becomes a prominent figure in pop culture because rock and roll artists start to be influenced, most notably Jimmy Page, who bought his house. The
Beatles.
Led Zeppelin, the Beatles. But Hollywood also, Kenneth Anger, who was a producer or director. David Lynch is probably one of the most famous people in Hollywood that was incredibly influenced by Aleister Crowley. And there's a guy that comes on the scene named Peter J Carrol and a couple of other people. And they come up with, they create this whole magical system called chaos magic. And what they were doing was they were acknowledging that these magicians who were wrapped up in all this ritual, the bells, the smells, the incense, and the nonsense, right? And but they were getting results. Stuff was really happening. So they said, we want to, and they were influenced by Spare. They said, we want to create a magical system that is completely free of any religious belief, completely free of any metaphysical beliefs, and certainly completely free from any belief in God.
Yeah.
So the idea behind chaos magic was that, and there are a few assumptions you have to make. The first assumption has to do with chaos theory, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, I suppose.
Yep.
So they bring in chaos theory, and then they bring in relativism in the sense that they approach belief from the standpoint of nothing is true and nothing is absolute. So from the perspective of chaos magic, a belief is embraced for its usefulness alone. The question is never asked, is this true? Is this not true? And then it became kind of a scientific system of playing with beliefs, playing with sigils, playing with the human psyche, and then recording the results in sort of a scientific way, certainly not a controlled scientific study, but in a scientific way of saying, okay, what's getting us results? And are those results repeatable? So there was no interest. It's completely a pragmatic system, completely a system that says, try different things. If you get results with it, great. If you get consistent results with it, even better. Yep. If it's not working for you at all, don't even ask yourself the question, is this true or is this not true? Just realize this doesn't work.
Right.
And so that's why I put the title for tonight, the Magic for the Rest of Us, or you could say Magic for Atheists, because they're very clear. And Peter J Carrol in his writings is very clear. There is no belief in any type of God that is required. There is no belief in any kind of afterlife that is required. Mm-hmm. There is no belief in anything metaphysical. You don't have to believe in angels or demons or fairies or nature spirits or elemental spirits or anything like that. You're simply working with beliefs and intentions, kind of a precursor to what we have today as the law of attraction, but much more sophisticated than what we learn about in the law of attraction.
Right.
So people might be saying, okay, what is chaos magic? Most people, if you're like me, what you know about chaos theory is sort of this metaphor for chaos theory that the flap of a butterfly's wings in Australia can cause a massive chain reaction to take place within the atmosphere that then can cause tornadoes in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for example, right?
Right.
So the idea was that by making small changes in your beliefs, your perceptions, your actions, that you could get big results. And so chaos magic is about playing with these things, not trying to figure out what's real, what's not real, what's true, what's not true, none of that, but just playing with things like beliefs and playing with, like I said, sigils, various different stuff like that, and then measuring what kind of results that you get from that. So that's my setup. I'm going to go get some ice. I'll be right back, and I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you, Aaron. That was a really good introduction to chaos magic. And where I want to start, because, I think that my contribution to this, because this is something that we've talked about in great detail, but it's something that I don't understand a lot about, but you do. So I'm looking forward to growing in real time tonight. But I want to talk about chaos theory for a second, because you alluded to this, that it's a branch of mathematics that focuses on complex systems, that their behaviors are subject to slight changes, right? Or you mentioned the butterfly effect, right? So chaos theory studies dynamic systems that are really sensitive to initial conditions, but it highlights how small small changes can lead to outcomes that are hard to predict accurately. And so this is almost like, it's almost like quantum physics. It's like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where you can know the position of a quantum particle or quantum phenomenon, but you don't know its velocity, or you can know its velocity, but you don't know its position. So you don't have full data. And because of that, you can't ascertain any degree of certainty from it. All you have are varying degrees of probability. Now, where I think chaos theory and chaos magic tie together is, you mentioned that what chaos magic is modern magical practice, right? This and is deeply pragmatic. You mentioned that it's like, I think of chaos magic it is like the spiritual equivalent of Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do.
Okay.
Because in the martial art Jeet Kune Do, it's a formless art. In other words, it doesn't have any forms or any rituals or anything like that. It's like, basically, it's an object oriented martial art. In other words, you take what works and apply that to your repertoire, and you exclude what doesn't. And so I'm going to pick on sigils for a second, because that the sigils are symbols, and that's all I'm going to go into. I'm going to let you explain that more.
Sure.
But the idea is that these sigils are used as tools to affect changes in reality. But to your point, it's like, okay, you put together a stream where I'm going to do this to affect this, or to this, I'm going to do this to affect that. Let's say it that way. And if that doesn't materialize, or if the result is not achieved, then, like you said, you don't sit up and try to analyze whether it's true or not. You just say, okay, I'm going to replace wholesale what I've done to do something else to try to get the same influence. And here's the interesting thing I thought about chaos magic is that there is a sense, and this is where it's anti-religiousness really comes into play, because if something doesn't work, unlike like with quantum physics, for example, if you're conducting an experiment in quantum physics and your result is not what you expect, then what you're going to do, you're not going to abandon the entire experiment. You're just you're going to change some parameters and see if that produces the outcome that you're looking for, right? And does this result in something that's repeatable? Whereas chaos magic just says, screw it, throw it all out and start afresh. And what I love about what I'm learning about chaos magic is how pragmatic it is, because I always talk about, what is tangible, what is measurable, what is repeatable. And chaos magicians, that's what they focus on. They focus on, how do I affect real tangible change that's measurable, that I can quantify it, and that it's repeatable. And if it doesn't fit those criteria, then you say, okay, punt and try again. And maybe not even punt, maybe like change teams,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and also, like, there are two things where there are two tangencies between chaos theory and chaos magic, is that they both focus on the unpredictability of systems, right? So in chaos theory, the system's dynamics is, how you said, like, changes, how can I say, random changes in a closed system. But in chaos magic, it's the spiritual or magical outcome, right? And the second tangency is the impact of small changes. So the butterfly effect that we experience, or that we hypothesize or theorize in chaos theory, well, it's these same small changes impact, influence, and inform chaos magic. But the difference, though, going back to what you were saying, is that chaos magic is not interested in the small changes in tweaking. Let's put it that way. Small changes may be incorporated into the initial formula or the initial application, but if the application doesn't work, it's not go back and tweak.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, basically, empty out that bottle and fill it with something else. It's not trying to figure it out. So the thing is that they came about independently, but it's like some of the language and the concepts of chaos theory are found and repeated in, metaphorically, by practitioners of chaos magic, right? So it's like interconnectedness, nonlinear effects, sensitivity to conditions. All of these are the metaphorical underpinnings of chaos magic, right? And the thing that really ties them both together is like the fluid and dynamic nature of both, and how they how can I say that they, I'm going to use these words a lot today, so bear with me. Inform, influence, and impact what we belief and reality, and that's where I'm going to stop.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. So yeah, one of the assumptions of chaos magic, chaos magicians, is that everything is connected in some way. So the idea, just to be clear for people, the idea of a butterfly's wings causing a tornado in Tulsa, and I'm just picking that because you're there, or I know you're not there right now. It's just talking about the randomness and the interconnectedness of everything, right? So the idea isn't, well, if I just get a butterfly to flap its wings in this location right here, I can cause a tornado. It's not that cause and effect type of thing. It's just saying everything's interconnected and everything's in a relationship. And because it is a closed system, meaning there's not infinite possibilities,
right,
then small change, because everything's connected, is going to impact and cause a change to everything else around it.
Right.
So an example of this, you tell me what you think about this, but our bodies, to a certain degree, right? Our bodies are a closed system, but they are a system of systems, right? I mean, we refer to them that way. My respiratory system, my circulatory system, my digestive system, right? So we are a system of systems, and then within those systems are tissues, and within those tissues are cells, and within those cells are, DNA, messenger. I mean, it's just layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of the small things that are interacting. But you're a good example of this. Small changes to your body can give you big results, right? So you decided, I'm going to go into ketosis because I want to lose weight. So how do I go into ketosis? Well, I've got to, definitely stay away from sugar. I assume stay away mostly from carbs.
Yep.
And then you're testing your pH level in the mornings, I assume, as this sort of feedback loop, right? So at the end of the day, even though somebody may say the keto diet is a huge change for me, at the end of the day, it's really not. I mean, you're still enjoying life. You're still eating good food. You're still eating, for crying out loud, right?
Exactly.
You didn't go to the gulag where you're just working all day and getting bread and water or whatever, right? So relatively small change, and you've lost a lot of weight. And so you've got a feedback mechanism, both between how much weight are you losing? Am I still in ketosis? How much can I eat this or drink that and still stay in ketosis? And I suppose that there are levels of nuance for every individual, right? I suppose that the diet wouldn't be the same when you have that kind of feedback system. It wouldn't be the same for everybody. If I was doing that, you and I might eat the same meal, and I might get up and check my test strip the next day, and I might be out of ketosis, and you might still be in it, right?
Yep.
Salt. If I eat too much salt, it can raise my blood pressure. If I raise my blood pressure, it can elevate my risk of heart attack and stroke. It can literally end my life.
Yeah, correct.
Right? Or I could take a small little pill, tiny little pill for blood pressure. Tiny little pill, small change. But it's so systemic that it could extend my life because it prevents my blood pressure from going up, right? With high blood pressure. If I'm got high blood pressure because I'm eating the way I'm eating or whatever the case may be that's causing it. Most people think, well, it raises your risk of heart attack and stroke, but it also can do kidney damage. It can mess up your eyes. It's just bad for the entire system. So it's this idea that everything's in a relationship and interconnected, and that it doesn't take big changes to get big results. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is there's an understanding within chaos magic, and people that are truly practicing it are very dogmatic about this. They're not dogmatic about a lot of stuff, but they're dogmatic about this. That there is a subjective universe, which is my world in here, let's say. My feelings, my thoughts, my beliefs, my imaginations, all of that stuff. That's the subjective universe. So when I go to sleep at night, I enter fully into that subjective universe when I dream. The world out there is what they call the objective universe.
Yeah.
And so this is where they're dogmatic. We are not making any statements, declarative statements, about the nature of what's out there. And magic then is seen, Aleister Crowley defined magic as change made according to will. So I will a change, and I'm able to make that change happen. So chaos magic would say it's a willed change in either universe, the subjective universe or the objective universe. And then there is an assumption that there is a connectedness between subjective self and the objective universe, that the lines aren't as clear as maybe Newtonian physics makes us want to believe or think, right?
Right.
So the idea is if I change a belief, that can be like the flap of a butterfly's wings. It's going to create all kinds of chaos and chaotic change in my life, for better or for worse, which is why that feedback loop is so important.
Yeah.
So the idea of a sigil, this is where sigils come in. So what a sigil is, for people that don't know, is it's an artistic whatever. It could be anything.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way. It's just something that you put on paper that's a little bit chaotic. So it's not a painting of a portrait of Derrick Day.
Right.
It's not a painting of a house. It's more, I think, modern art and that kind of thing. Joe Dispenza actually teaches a version of this in one of his books where he says, write out a statement that you want to see occur, then take out all the vowels and just leave the consonants,
yeah,
and then create a drawing out of the consonants, and then charge it with your intention, and then forget about it. And then anytime you're thinking about whatever it is that you want, you can just focus on that symbol, right? So here's the thing. The belief was that if I have an intention, if I have a wish, if I have a desire, I need to affect change out here. And just the smallest change can cause a chain reaction that can cause what I'm wishing and hoping to come to pass. So if I create a drawing, I am actually creating a change in the objective universe that connects with my subjective. Very small, but if I didn't draw that sigil and I didn't draw it with that intention that I had, that sigil wouldn't exist. And so that sigil then, in the context of chaos magic, becomes the flap of a butterfly's wings. That then, hopefully, under the theory of chaos magic, will create a change. This violates every cause and effect belief that we have from Newtonian physics. And it's embracing saying everything is interconnected. And the smallest change to the smallest part of the system can create the biggest change to the biggest part of the system. The problem is, just like with the butterfly's wings, we don't know what that's going to create, right? So just to make it a little bit more practical, have you ever had a conversation with someone and they said something in passing and it changed your perspective on something that then changed on some level, any level, the direction of your life.
Absolutely.
Have you ever read a book that impacted the way you think and caused you met somebody on the street that knew somebody and you got a job? I remember I was working in retail. A customer comes in. There was a specific place that I wanted to work. He worked in that place. So I made a point of building a relationship with this customer with the intent of getting a job with the company that he worked for. And it worked out for me. But if someone else would have waited on that customer when he came in, there was 7 or 8 of us salespeople there. If I hadn't been the one to wait on him, if I hadn't wanted to work for that place, that event never would have happened in my life. And that event completely changed my life. If I read a book, the decision to go to the bookstore that day, the decision to look at this particular part of the book sections, this book catches my eye. I read this book. Oh my God, this just impacts me right where I'm at. And I'm going to make changes. I'm going to start investing because I just happened to pick up a book on investing. Yep. And it didn't sound complicated or too big for me. And I thought, okay, I can follow this system. And so I go and invest in money in the stock market, let's say, although that, anyway. Or I invest in real estate. I decide to invest in real estate instead, and I buy it just the right time, and it creates wealth for me. All of that because I decided, you know what? I'm not going to go to work today. I'm going to go to Barnes & Noble today. The small little things that we do in life that we don't even think about that can create massive changes in our lives is at the heart of what the chaos magic system is.
And so you had talked about chaos magic relative to the occult, and I want to do a little bit of level setting, a little bit of house cleaning here because
sure.
You've taught a lot. You've taught extensively on the occult and how it's become sort of a boogeyman to religious folks.
Yeah.
But occult just refers to the knowledge of hidden and the mysterious, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I want to do now is I want to because we talk about gnosis a lot, and we're going to be talking more about Gnosticism, but there is a gnosis that's unique to chaos magic.
Yeah.
Right? And so that gnosis, it begins with altered states of consciousness.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I want to do, what I want to do is I want you to, to double click on this and kind of unpack this. Okay. So we know that gnosis in the Christian sense, or in the Christ sense, let's say that, not Christian, let's say Christ, that this gnosis refers to hidden knowledge. And so if you think about this, juxtaposing that with the definition of the occult, then essentially we're talking about the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so when I tell people that Jesus was like the original occultist, people get really mad about that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, I mean, gnosis is very tied to that. So again, like with this gnosis, so I want to talk about how is the gnosis in chaos magic different than the Gnostic Christ teachings, right?
Sure.
And let's drill into that a little bit, because I think this is going to help a lot of people. And let me just say this real quick before I go. I just want to segue into this very briefly, that the whole purpose of these discussions is really to help people understand something that may not be articulated the way you're accustomed to hearing it articulated. And when you hear something that is articulated in a way that you're not accustomed to, there are two things that happen, and either one of them is fine, but you either hear this and you reject it, completely dismiss it out of hand, And for those of you that do that, I would say, okay, you need to get off your religion for a minute, because this means you have a religion. And the other thing too is that you had talked about how religious some of these magicians are. So what we need to do is we need to say, okay, well, in chaos, and when you say separating chaos magic from traditional magic, that the rituals go away. So this is really like deconstructed magic, right?
Yeah, very much so.
But the second thing is that it causes you to think in a way that you normally don't. It creates a shock to the system and forces you to consider or wrestle with something you ordinarily would not. So I want to say that before I turn it over to you to really look at Gnostic from a Christ standpoint versus Gnosis, or Gnosis in the Christ sense versus Gnosis in the chaos magic sense. So
yeah, I love how you set that up, because you said, hopefully the purpose of these discussions is to hopefully make you think of things in a way you haven't thought of before. That in and of itself is chaos magic.
Magic.
So in this sort of way, we're doing a magical practice right now. So yeah, let me think about where to start with that. You mentioned, you say that Jesus was the original occultist. Morton Smith wrote a book called Jesus the Magician, where he looked at the magical traditions and practices of the pagan world and the similarities with what Jesus was doing, and says, so he postulates that Jesus was not a Galilean prophet, and he wasn't a savior, and he wasn't any of this stuff. He was just a magician in a Jewish magician in Palestine. And he makes a fairly convincing argument for it. And I know, I think, is it safe to say you're a mythicist?
I am a mythicist.
Okay.
I'm a mythicist, but I'm also a mystic.
Yeah. But when we're talking about, I see what you did there. But when we're talking about Jesus, if we assume that he was real, one of the things I read recently is a book called Jesus New Vision by Whitley Strieber. And Whitley's an atheist, as far as I can tell. I think he's even said that. Or maybe he's agnostic at best, in some of his other, interviews and writings and stuff that I've exposed myself to. But he does believe that this is interesting. He's, as far as I can tell, he's an atheist. He may be agnostic, but he is definitely not. He is definitely in line with a lot of the things that you say, Derrick, in the sense of magic is just science we haven't figured out yet, and all of that stuff. But he genuinely believes that Jesus raised from the dead. And he sets forth his argument in this book. And one of the things that he says is he looks at, it's almost Easter time, we're in Lent, right?
Mm-hmm.
He looks at the Passion of Christ narratives from the scriptures, and he sees it as an elaborate ritual of sympathetic magic. And it's a fascinating argument. I'm not saying I believe it. I'm just saying it's a fascinating argument. For those that don't know what sympathetic magic is, the word sympathy, so pathos is at the root of it. So it's passion or feeling. And then sympathy, usually suffering, that kind of passion, like we think of the Passion of the Christ. So let's just say suffering.
Yeah.
And then sympathy, think symphony, right?
Yep.
When they're warming up for the symphony, it's just chaotic sound. But when they play Mozart, it all blends together.
Right.
So sympathetic magic is also based on this belief that everything is connected in some way, but that things that are seemingly unrelated are actually related. So without getting into all this, so they talk about correspondences. And so the color that I use, the sound, the type of incense, all that stuff is forms of sympathetic magic. And this goes way back to the time of Jesus. So he sees Jesus as deliberately getting himself crucified, deliberately doing it at a specific time, deliberately provoking the religious leaders by cleansing the temple, and the Romans by some of the things that he said, and doing it collectively with a group as this giant ritual of sympathetic magic that
Wow.
then apparently worked. It's a fascinating argument.
I've got to get that book. But have you ever seen some of these early Christian paintings where Jesus is depicted holding a wand?
Yes.
And I always thought that was fascinating because, these are the earliest archetypes of Jesus, right? And almost 100% of them, he's holding a magic wand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to your point, perhaps that if we were to assume that the person of Jesus is not a myth, or let's say for example that the person of Jesus is a composite character comprised of many magicians who did signs and wonders, right? Mm-hmm. And now in that case, I can kind of get down with that. I can get down with the composite thing. But to your point, think about the ramifications of that. If the entire gospel message is nothing but a very elaborate magic ritual, or sympathetic magic ritual that culminates so like every magician, every illusionist, they have their grand finale.
Mm-hmm.
What are they? Like David Copperfield made an airplane disappear. David Blaine floats in the air, kind of thing, right? What if this resurrection event was really a very carefully constructed magic trick? It was the culmination of a sympathetic magical ritual that lasted 3.5 years. I actually like that.
I think you'd like the book. I think you'd like Whitley because he's very disciplined in his scientific approach to things.
Okay.
But he's had incredible supernatural experiences throughout his life that are unlike anything I've ever heard of before. He wrote the book Communion about some of that. I think he also wrote the book Wolfen. So, he was an author. He had these experiences with non-human intelligences that both raped him and planted an implant in his ear. And he writes about these things, but he's very level-headed. He's very grounded. And like I said, he's very scientific in his approach. So I think you'd like it. It's Jesus, A New Vision or something. Okay. Whitley, you could pay us if you come across this. Send us a tithe.
Yeah. Hey, we'll put our cash app in the comments.
So back to Gnosis. So Gnosis has to do with personal experiential knowledge. It values, it's unlike what we have at all in the Western world today, mm-hmm. in that it values personal experiential knowledge, or what we might call your truth.
Right.
So for the Gnostic Christians, Jesus was, and here's the thing that I can tell, like, tell me you haven't studied Gnosticism, but tell me that you're doing the Dunning-Kruger effect by telling me about Gnosticism, but what you tell me lets me know you haven't even read a book about Gnosticism.
Right.
Because we act like it's a monolithic system of beliefs about
right.
Christ is and what Christ was, and it's not at all.
No.
But there are some key components to it, and what makes it Gnostic is that you're looking within. You're looking to the subjective universe,
right,
to find out what your truth is. So rather than Gnosticism is an approach to Christianity that was not based on whether or not a historical Jesus did anything.
Right.
It's based on really visions, revelations, looking within, finding the God within, all of this stuff. So people were being encouraged to break away from Roman paganism, and Greco-Roman paganism, and look within. It was really kind of the first individualistic religion that we ever had. I mean, they were the original, I don't have a religion, I have a relationship, Christians. because they placed value on that. They placed a high value on that.
Right.
And by placing a high value on individual experience, it allowed then for a lot of flexibility in beliefs, because there was no orthodoxy. There was no right way of believing. The only thing that was wrong for them was, and I'm making very generalized statements here, the only thing that was wrong for them was orthodoxy itself, because it was taking away your personal liberty and individual experience, stuff like that. So gnosis has to do with an experience that is subjective to you.
Right.
So remember I said that in the chaos magic system, there's a subjective universe that's me and my thoughts, my feelings, my beliefs, my imaginations, my desires. And then there's an objective world out there that doesn't seem to always respond to my thoughts, beliefs, wishes, and desires, right?
Yeah.
So magic could be considered change according to will. It didn't matter whether it was change according to the subjective universe. So for them, you have done a magical work by transforming your physique. Because all it took was you changing yourself. You created a change in your subjective universe to get the goal that you wanted to get. So within the context or from the viewpoint of chaos magic, what you did was a magical practice. Right? So chaos magic says it's sort of a blend of mysticism and I hesitate to say science, but there is a scientific method to it, in the sense, pragmatism is probably the better word.
Yeah.
How did this work for you in your experience? But a lot of it has to do with change in the subjective experience. So for example, some chaos magic groups, in order to be initiated, you had to find an area where you were extreme in your life. So let's say you were a conservative radio talk show host that said he was to the right of Rush Limbaugh. Pretty extreme, right?
Yeah, I kick myself whenever I play those words over.
Watch this. So an act of chaos magic would be to go immerse yourself in a liberal, let's say Marxist point of view as much as possible, and really try to become that in order to view the world through that lens and through that perspective.
That's actually what I did, but keep going.
Yeah, you are a chaos magician, my friend. If you're a pacifist, you come from the Mennonite church or something, and you want to be an objective observer, whatever, and then you say, well, I don't know about that, I want to get into chaos magic. They might tell you, go study, go become a boxer, or even more extreme, go join the military, not as an objective observer, but to kill people if you have to, if you go to war. To see what that's like for you. So, and then you compare results. So when I was a Christian, I had a way of thinking and a way of feeling and a way of believing, and I knew what the results was that I was getting back from that after 30 years of practice. Swinging the pendulum the other way. This is why what you say, you really are a chaos magician at heart, because you were the one that challenged me. Unless you at least flirted with atheism, then you haven't really deconstructed. That's an act of chaos magic, because it's forcing you to, okay, let me try to understand the world from an atheist perspective. Let me try on the atheist perspective, and then let me compare, because in chaos magic, it doesn't matter what's true.
Right.
So if I was happier, better off, more joyful, enjoying my life, more satisfied as a pastor in the Christian church than I am as an atheist over here, then chaos magic would say, go back and be a pastor again. Because it's not about what's true. It's about what works, gnosis.
Right.
So my personal experience, if my personal experience was more enriched and my life had more meaning, and I was enjoying my life more as a Christian pastor. But then I come out here and I try atheism,
Mm.
and it sucks, and I'm depressed, and I'm dystopic, and I'm nihilistic, and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. You got to go back.
Go back, because it doesn't matter what's true.
Right.
It's your experience. It's your gnosis. So I have a gnosis over here as a pastor. I have a gnosis over here as an atheist. I have a gnosis over here as a conservative right winger. I have a gnosis over here as a communist, let's just say.
Yeah.
And then I can either find my balance, or I decide, you know what, this is me, man. This really fits for me. I'm really passionate about this. This is so chaos magic gives you that flexibility, because you're not asking the Aristotelian question of what's true and false.
Mm. Yeah.
So it's a way of approaching life that bypasses certain elements of Aristotelian logic, which then would be gnosis. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and you know, like you did answer that very well, because I think that I understand gnosis from a chaos magic perspective, you know, and as well as I understand gnosis in a Christ standpoint. So let's look at this for a second, right? When you look at chaos theory or chaos magic,
Mm-hmm.
and manifestation,
Mm-hmm.
and I think about these things like for example, Jesus, when after the resurrection, he appears to his disciples in the, I don't know, it was a room that they were in. That was not the upper room, but this was a room, and the room was locked
Mm-hmm.
from the outside,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Jesus manages to enter the room.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about this. So like I'm now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to compare and contrast chaos magic and quantum physics, because I think that there may be something there. Because again, what you're doing is saying, okay, my observation is going to dictate the result,
Mm-hmm.
which that's a key tenet of quantum physics, in that any observation of a quantum phenomenon impacts its outcome.
Mm-hmm.
It changes the result. The observation is a catalyst, in other words. So now you look at Jesus. Well, let's back it up even further. Let's look at the resurrection, right? If the resurrection is an actual event, if it's an historical event, then that means that this is both quantum and chaos magical,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, and that's Whitley's
Yeah.
approach.
And so now after the resurrection, Jesus comes to his disciples, and that's when he appears, and Thomas says, I don't believe. Jesus says, look, touch this wound in my side. And Thomas is now believing, right? But how does Jesus get into the room? So on the one hand, from the quantum standpoint, you could say that Jesus unpacks himself as a particle, because we talk about wave functions. You and I talked about this a lot, and how wave functions collapse into something tangible, right? Something that that's observable, into some particle, and it's this agreement that drives that wave function collapse. But let's say for the sake of example that Jesus put that in reverse. So he uncollapses the wave function and becomes a wave instead of a particle, thus allowing him to transcend matter. And so what I'm getting at is like, chaos magic is dealing with how to achieve a measurable result from something uncertain.
Exactly. You got it exactly right. That's exactly what it is.
So again, if we talk about, okay, Jesus, if we assume any historical context to this,
right.
that he unpacked the wave function In other words, like where normally a wave function collapses into some particle, something that we can observe and measure, and we can say, okay, this is something, we know the probability of this. We can calculate the probability of this thing. But in order for him to transcend matter, then it would have to be first, like this would be chaos magic, because now what you've done is you've turned something that was totally uncertain, totally improbable, into something tangible, right? And it's also quantum, but it's quantum in reverse. And dude, I think that this could be something. And this could be this could be the beginning of a really good hypothesis.
Yeah. So where it's different, let's say, than the law of attraction. So the law of attraction, or faith, as we taught it in our circles.
Yeah.
The assumption is certainty gets results. From a chaos magic perspective, it's the uncertainty,
right,
that gets you results. It's the flexibility in your own belief system that gets you results, which is impossible if you're certain that you know what you know is right. But also, you could look at it approaching it this way too. I'm going to try these changes and see what happens. Or let's say I want to become wealthy. Well, how many ways is there to become wealthy? So I would realize then I wouldn't sit there and try to win the lottery through certainty. You know what I mean? Like go buy a lottery ticket and think, I'm going to win this time. I got it. I know I got it this time. I know I'm going to win it. I'm going to win the lottery. Although I did have a friend who won the Colorado State lottery in the 90s, who every single freaking day was saying, I'm going to win the lottery. And every time he'd buy the tickets and every time they'd do the numbers, he'd be like, the day before, he'd be like, I'm going to win the lottery. I'm going to win the lottery. I'm going to win the lottery. And after about 3 years of doing this, dude won the lottery.
Yeah.
Millions. Became a millionaire overnight. But it's not that certain. You see what I'm saying? So like the law of attraction thing would say, if you want to attract it, you have to see it. You have to feel it. You have to believe it. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But chaos magic would be different in the sense that my goal might be more general. I want to be wealthy. So the reason I'm not wealthy is because of who I am, not because of anything out there. It's because I don't understand finances. I've got bad spending habits. I don't have the right job skills. I haven't found the right investment, whatever the case may be, right?
Right.
So say, how can I go to work on myself in order to create wealth? How do I have to think? So maybe I go buy a bunch of books, The Millionaire Next Door, Dad Poor Dad,
Ray Dalio's Principles, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, who was the guy? Benjamin. They wrote the book, The Intelligent Investor or something, that Warren Buffett follows his system.
Yeah.
So I'm going to educate myself. And by educating myself, I'm going to change things in here. And then by changing things in here, I'm going to be able to create wealth. So it isn't this kind of certainty. It has to come this way. It has to come through this avenue. I'm setting an intention for this and going for it. And then I'm going to be very, very, very flexible in this system of uncertainty about how this is going to work out for me.
But like you made a really good point here, because this is, I think that like chaos magic totally eschews certainty and practice and steps, right?
Yep.
In other words, so I like what you had said about Dr. Dispenza, how he said, you write out something, something that you're believing for, that you're hoping for, that you're dreaming of, and you eliminate all the vowels. So you have all these consonants, and so now you make these consonants into a picture. Hey, that's a great idea for making an NFT, by the way.
It is
food for thought. Just food for thought. I mean, let's say that we create an intention to make an NFT that we can sell and make money, right?
Right.
But the point is that you take this and what you've done is you've taken something that that has a structure, right? And what you've done is deconstructed it, right? You've taken out the vowels to make a word diagram that doesn't make sense in and of itself, right? And then let's say you order these things, you order these consonants, these remaining consonants into some structure, right? Say a flower of life, a tree of life, kind of diagram.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly.
So now you've created a sigil, right? And you've programmed your intention into it, and now you set this forth. You take it from your subjective universe and export it into the objective universe with the intention of drawing something from the objective universe into the subjective universe.
Yep.
That is really, really, man. I'm telling you, this. The scales are falling off my eyes as we speak.
Yeah. So I will say this. I mentioned, a couple of people. I mean, Austin Osman Spare clearly, obviously, was, pre-World War II, maybe even pre-World War I. Peter J Carrol.
Yep.
I don't know.
Peter Carrol. Yep.
I don't know if he's still alive or not. He takes some principles in his books from Egyptian constructs of magic and stuff like that. But the whole point of chaos magic is that it's a free system for you to explore and to work with in and of itself. So if anybody does pick those up and they're reading, well, what the hell is this? All this stuff. Then you just, like Brother Hagen used to say, you eat the hay and leave the sticks.
Yep.
So
this is what I'm thinking, and help me out if I'm wrong about this, because we used to teach this. We used to teach this as pastors, as preachers of the gospel, and we'd say, that if you apply your faith and you put pressure on your faith covenant with God, that this pressure, just like how when you put pressure on your covenant with the United States government through the Constitution, that you produce a result, right? But let's just say that it really has nothing to do with covenant. It has nothing to do with belief. It has everything to do with what is my intention, what is my will, and so can I make a word picture of my will,
right,
that I can export and bring something tangible into my life. And then here's the other thing. The pragmatic part is very binary. Does it work or doesn't it? Right. Correct. And then the other thing is that if you try something and you say, okay, this is the result that I'm expecting. So I create runes, I create sigils, I create symbols, I do all of these things, but it doesn't work. So, our religious teaching would say, okay, go back and pray more, go back and study more, go back and fellowship more, right? But chaos magic says, no, shit can it, and start again. Don't lose the intention, but lose the methodology, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the risk of freaking everybody out, like,
no, freak them out, man.
Well, so when I got out of the hospital, the prognosis was not good. It really wasn't. But I knew from my past experiences within Christianity, like, I could have handled this from a, let's say, magical perspective. Back then it would have been faith and putting pressure. That's what got me thinking about this was, you described that so well. That's what we were doing. We were putting pressure on the covenant with God.
Right.
And we were getting results because of things like you said, because of intention, because of who knows, because that's why it's chaos magic.
Right.
Who knows all the interactions and changes and why sometimes it happened and sometimes it didn't. But all of that was acts of chaos magic. So if we strip away all of the doctrines.
Ooh.
So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, what can I implement? And I actually did a sigil. As soon as I got out, I created a sigil. So that, because every time I'd start thinking about my prognosis, I knew I would start ruminating on it. But if I would take that sigil and look at it, I knew that sigil would not speak to my conscious mind in any way, shape, or form. So it will allow me to open up to this uncertainty. Because I either had to have certainty in the old days, I would have had to have certainty one way or the other. Either I'm certain I'm healed by the stripes of Jesus, or I'm certain the doctor's right and I'm going to die. But this opens up to the uncertainty principle. Okay, maybe I am, but let's try this and let's see what happens. Let's see what works, right?
Yeah.
So I practice a form of meditation that I've done for lots of years, lots and lots of years. This is where it might freak people out a little bit. And actually, Carl Jung did this. He wrote a whole book about this type of meditation. And I found out about Carl Jung's journey afterwards. But it's called The Red Book, if anybody's interested in it. Where he just dove into his subconscious, and he met a man in his mind, an imaginary figure called Philemon, ironically enough. And Philemon was teaching him about his own theories and stuff. So a lot of the stuff that Carl Jung put out, he got from these figures in his mind, right? So from the perspective of any religious system, any rigid metaphysical system, if I'm meeting with Jesus in my mind, I'm meeting with Jesus, or I'm being deceived by an angel of light, or if I'm meeting with the archangel Michael, then he's been sent from God. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Or if from a shamanic perspective, if I'm meeting with a snake, I'm meeting with my totem or my power animal or my power spirit, or whatever the case may be. So yesterday I was practicing. So it's this form of meditation where you place your attention on the first image that pops into your mind, and you kind of flesh it out in your imagination, and then you just roll with it. And it's very akin to remote viewing, actually, in the sense that you don't try to superimpose your beliefs or thoughts or ideas on something.
Yeah.
So I get this image and I start entering into this experience. I've done this thousands and thousands and thousands of times, right?
Yep.
And I come into this clearing in my vision, and there's a person sitting in the middle of this clearing in my mind, and I'll be damned if it wasn't Jesus. And I haven't because I used to do this all the time, interact with Jesus in this way.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Jesus in 10 years.
Yeah.
In any time that I did this. And so you might imagine that immediately I was like, oh, it's what my mind was doing. Oh, that religious bullshit, it's so hard to get it out of us and stuff like that. But instead I said, you know what? No, I'm going to suspend that, and I'm going to explore this, and I'm going to see what happens. Uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I said, in my mind, it's all an imaginary experience. I sat down with Jesus, and I got some profound insight that was very healing for me.
Yeah.
It shifted my way of thinking on something. So then I can look at that. But see, chaos magic allows me that uncertainty. It's like, oh, wait a minute, it's Jesus. I'm going to overlay. Or it's supposed to be Jesus, and instead I'm seeing Serenos, the horned god from ancient Greece. And, oh, no, get out of here, devil. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, right? Because I'm so certain. Whereas this is just an exploration of the subjective universe and letting everything be what it is, and then interacting with it and interacting with the experience, and then testing and weighing the results after the fact, rather than being beholden to any particular form or belief system or way of thinking about the world.
So I want to go back to gnosis, and I want to talk about altered states of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
How do we disabuse ourselves of conscious thought and get ourselves into a state where whereby we're able to really focus our will, right? Because in chaos magic, from what I understand,
Mhm.
that gnosis, part of it is divorcing yourself from your external consciousness. In other words, you're
Yep.
almost going from your from your mammalian brain to your lizard brain, right? But what you're doing is you're taking your will to affect something, to produce something down to this level. So in other words, I always think about that episode of SpongeBob where Squidward has this friend he's trying to impress, and he hypnotizes SpongeBob into being this Uber waiter, right? He said,
Mhm.
focus on fine dining, free your mind. And so SpongeBob gets it. He's like, all of a sudden, he's just, he's executing flawlessly until Squidward's friend asks him, you're the best waiter I've ever had. What's your name? And SpongeBob's brain, it lights a fire, because now you've gone from this altered state of consciousness where you are actually invoking your will to produce a result that maybe you ordinarily could not have. But then consciousness comes in and short circuits the whole thing,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that too. I want to talk because I remember when the movie Altered States came out, and Brian, my brother, and we got really into this, and we were like into this whole sensory deprivation thing. How can I get to the point, like, and so we experimented with darkness and enclosed spaces, and there was a little bit of mescaline and LSD involved in this too. But we were trying to figure out, okay, like in this altered state, will you experience religious truth? Will you experience scientific truth? Because the objective is understanding something that your conscious mind could not. So I want to talk about. I want you to talk about that for a minute. The whole altered state concept as it pertains to, or how altered states relate to chaos magic gnosis.
Yeah. 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 How much time you got? Jeez. Um,
Much as you have, man.
so I guess the key, I'm trying to think because my mind's all over the place. I could go anywhere with that question. So
Free your mind, Aaron.
yeah,
Free
right.
your mind.
Clear my mind.
Clear
An,
your
al-
mind.
an altered state of consciousness is just that. It is an altered state of awareness. So it has to recognize that we have a habitual state of awareness. We have a habitual way of seeing the world. We have a habitual way of thinking about the world. Um, and for most of us, it's that uh, three-dimensional reality out there, right? And what's coming in. So an altered state of, anytime you daydream, you go into an altered state of consciousness. Anytime you're driving home, you ever been driving home from something and you're like, shit, I don't remember going through those last 3 intersections because I was thinking about telling my boss off or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's an altered state of consciousness.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like chaos magic and stuff, when it comes to these kinds of things, so this is my assumption. This is my assumption about how this works. I think that our bodies and our brains are there to filter out information. I've talked about consciousness being base reality. Let's tweak that a little bit and let's say everything that exists as information.
Okay.
That there is information in everything, right? There's information in your DNA. I mean, it's just fascinating to me that, you could have an organ transplant and have to take immunosuppressive medicine because your body knows that's not you.
Yeah.
So there's intelligence there. At least there's some kind of exchange of information that's saying, hey, wait, the information I'm getting from this kidney that I got from my sister isn't my kidney. And so therefore it's foreign and we need to invade it and attack it, right?
Yeah.
There's some exchange of information. So this is where I'm at. I think that we are embedded in a system of information and that we actually have access to all of it at any point in time, everywhere in the universe as human beings.
Yeah.
And that our bodies and our brains are specifically wired to filter out the vast majority of it.
Yeah.
So that we think in certain terms. I remember being younger. I'm going to give a shameful example. I'm going to be vulnerable here. I remember being younger, having a lot more testosterone than I have now.
Yeah.
And I went skiing, and I'm one of these people that I can just be in my head and forget. Like the worst game, the most nightmarish thing for me in my marriage is when Julie says, "Did you notice anything different?" Shit. What did I miss? What did I miss?
Right.
Oh, look, there's a new light fixture. When I love that new light fixture. I got that 6 months ago. And she dyed her hair or cut it or something. And it's like, fuck, I'm just that guy.
Free your mind.
But I remember being skiing and just being up in the mountains. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. It was having a mystical time skiing, right? Just enjoying it. And going up on the chairlift, and out of the corner of my eye, I see something. And I look, and it's something hanging from a tree, and it is a woman's underwear. And I'm like, now why the hell can I filter all this other shit out, but I can catch this woman's underwear? It's because I was horny most of the time back then. So my brain, that it was important to me. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Caught my eye, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how bad am I, right? Like, it's not even like the guy, the meme where he's walking with his girlfriend and he's looking back,
Yeah.
There's not even anybody in that underwear. It's just underwear. It's like, oh, sack, So we filter out the vast majority of information that's coming into us, even in the natural.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of chaos magic, an altered state of consciousness and will and all of that has to do with attention and not necessarily filtering out. It's both opening up to and filtering out. So let me do it this way. Julie wanted to win the lottery, and we were back in hyperfaith, and she became convinced based on some Harvard study or Princeton study where people were able to influence the random generation of numbers by thinking about certain numbers in a very statistically significant way.
Mm-hmm.
It's called PEAR, the initials, I think, was the name of the project. And I think I got that right. So she read about this and she became convinced, I can do this with the lottery. I can win the lottery. So every week she had a certain amount of numbers. She's putting the numbers down. She's, using her chaos magic to do this back when we were Christians, using her faith, right?
Yeah.
And as she began to do this, she began to think about what the ramifications would be of winning that much money. This was the Powerball back then. So this would have been, anywhere from what, 30 to $150 million, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And she began to really think through. She began to imagine in her mind, what would it really be like if we won that much money? How would that change our relationships? How would that change our relationship? How would that change what we're doing in our lives? How would that change the meaning that we attach to our lives? And after about 6 months of this and thinking this through, she's like, I don't want it. I don't want to win it because our family's they're going to turn into, money grubbing people that didn't want to have anything. We're never going to know who's a real friend and who's just trying to, you know, get up close to us, hoping that they could get some kind of money. We'll become kingmakers. I mean, think about what that kind of money could do for churches and ministries around the world. If you started giving it to them, you become kingmakers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And she's like, I don't want any part of that. Like, it would totally wreck and ruin our lives. So sometimes we can't get what we intend to get because we haven't really sat down and thought through what would it be like if this happened. We only it's like what's that saying, don't ever meet your heroes because they'll disappoint you.
Yeah.
It's almost like that. Like, we just have this romantic idea, money, relationship, health, whatever the case may be. And maybe if we get that, it ain't all that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm answering your question at all. I think you're asking, how do we clear or make space for that? Is that what you're asking? How do we?
Well, it's like, first of all, I guess the question is two parts, and I probably didn't clarify that. First of all, how do you clear that space? How do you reach that altered state of consciousness where the gnosis of chaos magic becomes a thing? And then second, how do you crystallize your will to the point that when you are in this altered state of consciousness and you've divested yourself or disabused yourself of everything else around you, now can you take this will down to that level and then project it out?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that, and the reason why I was asking that is that I think that if you are able to do that, I think that is the key to getting results.
Yeah, I agree completely, 100% agree. And this is why, going back, you got to be able to try on different things, because most of us think, like the point that I was making about the underwear hanging in the tree, is that because I was wired a certain way at that time, wouldn't do that now probably, but life changes.
I don't know.
This was many decades ago.
I don't know. So women's panties hanging in the tree is.
I don't know. Maybe it would. I don't know.
But anyway, please go ahead.
But I'm wired towards that, right?
Yeah.
And so it catches my attention. Whereas I'm not wired towards the new light fixture, which these are fictional stories. I'm making fun. Julie doesn't play that game with me. I'm just making fun of myself. But some of that other stuff might not seem as important or as significant. And then sometimes we can't crystallize our will. And that's why I brought up the example of Julie, because she, through exploring other ways of experiencing reality, which is an altered state of consciousness, she was able to experiment with what would it be like if I really won the lottery.
Yeah.
And then was able to let go of the need and the want and the desire to win the lottery at all. Therefore, change her will. So our will doesn't crystallize sometimes because we got all this subconscious stuff that we don't realize, that we kind of know intuitively, or we know at some level.
Yeah.
A weight loss journey, I've really struggled, man. I've really struggled the last 2 or 3 weeks to stay on my diet, to stay on with my exercise and stuff like that. Well, partly because I'm down to that last 10 pounds, and that last 10 pounds is a bitch.
Yep, it is. That's the hardest part.
But I also got a clean bill of health.
Nice.
So what had motivated me was, I got to get that clean bill of health. I got to get that clean bill of health. I got to get that clean bill of health. And as soon as I got it, where's my motivation now?
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? And so, but normally, like if we think about losing weight or whatever, I want to, but I kind of don't want to too. You know what I mean? I want to look good, but I also want to eat good. I want to look good, but I don't want to be sore the next day from having pushed around too many weights or do whatever those hellacious things where you were talking about last week with the kettlebell
thrusters. Kettlebell thrusters. I hate those as much as I hate burpees.
I don't want to do that, So that's partly why we can't crystallize our will, because we're so scattered, because on the one hand we're filtering stuff out, but on the other hand we just haven't become clear on the inside about what we want.
Yeah.
So clearing away that clutter, how do we do that? Realizing that as human beings, we become very, very rigid in the way that we see and think about life and the way we see and think about the world. And we do it habitually over and over again every day.
Yeah.
I used to have a guy that I would go to lunch with, and I could tell you exactly what he was going to tell me before I went to lunch with him, because he was going to be either mostly bitching about his job, bitching about how he wished that he was able to retire, and what a shitty job everybody above him was doing. Every conversation was that.
Wow.
And the amazing thing is that he was able to tell it to me like I was hearing it for the first time every time. Well, what did that tell me about him? That he constantly sits there and ruminates about how much he hates his job, right? So probably an extreme example, but I'm trying to illustrate a point that we constantly think the same things. We think within certain parameters of our lives. So an altered state of consciousness would be allowing yourself to get outside of those parameters, to think about what a life would be like if this wasn't the case.
Yeah.
If this wasn't true. And exploring it in your imagination first, or if you have trouble imagining, exploring it in your thought life first, or exploring it in your feelings. If you're one of these feelings person, people that's really in their feels all the time.
Yeah.
How does this feel? How would it feel to be this or do that? So that kind of meditation gives you a gnosis. It gives you knowledge. So when Julie realized, I don't want to become a multi-millionaire overnight because it would ruin our lives, then she did that through exploring what that would actually be like if that had happened. Whereas before, hearing about this experiment that had been done at one of the Ivy League schools, it wasn't even a possibility that we would probably win the lottery. So I wasn't even thinking about it. But now, Harvard or Princeton, whichever one it was showing this. Maybe I could do that with the lottery, right? Now I'm exploring something that I haven't explored before. So I think, to answer your question, taking time to really ask, why do I want this? Whatever it is, like why do I want to be healthy? Is it because and not judging? Is it because I want to feel better? Is it because I want to be here longer? A lot of people, especially a lot of women, and I suppose this is true of men too, they'll have a hard time being honest with themselves on the fitness journey because they'll give the answer they're supposed to give. Well, I want to be healthy. I want to live longer. I want to feel better. When at the end of the day, they just want to be hot. They just want to be hot and attract guys, or they want to be hot and attract women. But we can't say that. So we're not being honest with ourselves about why we want what we want. And that hinders us from being able to crystallize our will.
So last thing, and this is something like, we have talked about our spiritual experiences as Christian ministers, right? That we've seen the healing of the sick. We've seen people that are delivered from addictions and things like that, seeing the miraculous happen. And so this is where my mind is really expanding. This is the growing in real time part, because I always wonder, why is it that sometimes, and you and I, we've talked about this in great detail, why is it that sometimes the prayer works and sometimes the prayer doesn't? Similar situations, similar, desired outcomes, and yet you get different outcomes. It's like your mileage may vary on steroids, right? So this is where I'm coming to based on this discussion is that when you express your will in a very galvanized way, but the method is not galvanized. The method is fluid, but the will stays consistent.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking that what happens is that when we don't get tangible, measurable, repeatable results, is that we're not taking our will into every situation. And so I'm thinking that, and again, based on our discussion tonight, that in order for chaos magic to truly manifest and to produce a result means that the intention has to be clear, it has to be well defined, and it has to be persistent, right? So if you're able to carry this will from one magic scenario or one magic stream to another, if that will is consistent, then I think the result will be consistent. I mean, and I'm going to try this. I'm going to test this hypothesis
Yeah, I
because
think that's great.
this is really this has been a truly eye-opening conversation. I may go so far as to say, Aaron, that this may be my favorite discussion that we've had. I may go
Well,
that.
you're very gracious. You're very gracious because this is, this is a passion of mine.
No,
Obviously.
I get it, but here's the thing, and I want you to kind of talk about this because you and I have had similar experiences. We follow kind of a similar trajectory. What if? And let's say if and again, because the idea is we want to help people, we want to help people to grow, we want them to grow in real time with us. What if we were to say to Christians, to Muslims, to Hindus, to Buddhists, to Zoroastrians, whatever, right? Taoists, Shintoists, right? And say, okay, if you simply focus on the will, what is your will manifesting from the well of your subjective universe to produce a result in the objective universe?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How do so this is my question, my ending question.
Okay.
How do we get to that point where we're so dare I say dogmatic about our will,
Yep.
but not the method?
Yeah. Whew. I think it's important to understand that from this perspective, from the perspective of chaos magic, there is chaos.
Yeah.
There is uncertainty. There is randomness. There is probabilities. So I think, the classic question that came up when you and I were, experiencing miracles and signs and wonders, whatever. How come this person got healed and this person didn't?
Yeah.
Well, the belief in God, at least in the Christian perspective, is very deterministic, right? They got healed because God willed it. I put enough pressure on the covenant, as you said earlier. I love that way of explaining that God came through for me on this. You must not have put enough pressure on God's will because it presupposes a mind and entity that is in meticulous control of every circumstance and situation. That is not chaos theory. Right. That is certainty, right? That is not the flap of a butterfly's wings creating. So I think we have to allow for probabilities and take the pressure off of ourselves. I didn't get results here, so therefore I must have done something wrong. You may have done everything right, and that hurricane may have, maybe it resulted in a hurricane in Louisiana instead of a tornado in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Right. So I think allowing for that kind of uncertainty, even that, not uncertainty, allowing for that kind of randomness is really important. And this is where this speaks to your question, because if my will is solid and crystallized on something, but the methods are not, then I have the ability to keep going back at it and going back at it and going back at it. It's Thomas Edison and the light bulb, right? What's the story? I don't know if it's true or if it's a myth, but it's still powerful. The story of Edison, tried to create a light bulb 5,000 times or something and failed 5,000 times. And they asked him, how'd you keep going when you failed 5,000 times? And he says, I didn't ever fail. He said, each time it didn't work, I learned what not to do the next time.
Right.
So, so he kept adapting his approach to the feedback that he was receiving. So this can be a great way. I mean, you can apply this anywhere in life, right? Like, I want to be, I remember, I'll give you an example. I was in a conflict, like an ongoing conflict with somebody in my church, but it was one of those passive aggressive where it never gets confronted. I just know you don't like me. I know whatever I say, you're going to do the opposite, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I used to dread meeting with this person because they were in charge. I think, well, I'm not going to say because I'm just not going to say.
Yeah.
I don't know who's watching, right? But I dreaded meeting with this person. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to try a different approach. I am going to see this person. And when I see them, I am going to act excited to see them. I am going to act happy to see them. I'm going to act like they're a glass of water and I just came out 3 days out of the desert.
Yeah.
Right. So I meet with this person and I purposely light up, make a smile, open my posture. Man, it's so good to see you. And the look of shock on her face, flap of a butterfly's wings, right? The look of shock on her face. I mean, and she didn't know what to do. Now there's chaos. There's uncertainty. Like she knew how we were going to interact.
Right.
Completely transformed our relationship. Completely transformed it. So then that gave me feedback that I could apply to other situations and say the way I approach someone else to a large degree is going to determine the outcome that I get. And by being more cheerful and acting like I really like to see this person, even if I'm having to put it on, more often than not, it's going to work. Now, let's say I try that with a different person. I've tried this with clients. I just assume everybody needs affirmation. I just assume everybody needs to feel good. Yeah. There are some people that pisses them off.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget. I was like, okay, I got introduced to this through a training that I attended. And they're like, you're not reinforcing positive change if the person doesn't want to be affirmed and you're giving them affirmation. And I'm like, what? Everybody needs affirmation. So I go into my counseling setting and with a guy and I affirm him and I could just tell by his body posture. So I just stopped and commented on the process. And I said, I'm going to ask you a question. I said, what did you feel right now when I said that to you? What just happened with you? And he said, I want to reach across and just punch you right in the mouth.
Oh, shit.
I had no idea because, see, I was operating under rigid assumptions. So that caused me to change my entire approach to my client so that we have almost a combative relationship in the counseling room. And he has seen more change and more healing since I changed my approach to being more combative with him than he was ever getting with this soft sort of nurturing, oh, come here and just let me love you kind of approach.
Wow.
But it's being willing to read the feedback and then adjust and adapt. So back to your question, I set an intention. So back to Julie, she didn't want to be super wealthy. I don't want to be super wealthy, but I want to have enough to have freedom.
Yeah.
I want to have enough to be able to do the things that I want to do. I don't need to own a yacht. I don't need to own an island at all. At all.
Wow.
But I would like to be able to go to Mexico in May, I would like to be able to take a trip to Europe within the next year. I'd like to be able to fix up stuff around my house. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the intention can be there when you're really clear on what it is that you want. Okay, how do we get there? What do we do? Do we sell some stuff? Do we take some out of savings? Are we waiting for the stock market to crash and not just dip and maybe buy in? Or maybe we're going to buy in at these dips, but not go all the way in. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I was just sure the stock market was going to crash COVID happened, and I
Yeah.
sold off everything, man. Before I sold off everything, and
Yeah,
boy,
I
I miss
did that too.
boy, did I miss a windfall.
Yep.
So I learned, so I'm watching this thing that's happening now. And it's like, nah, it's just a dip.
Yeah.
We're just I'll buy a little bit because it's cheaper now,
Right.
but I'm not going all in,
Not going all in, and definitely not cashing in.
and definitely not. Definitely not.
Right.
But I learned that, right?
That is, dude, this has been one of the single most enlightening episodes for me. I'm not kidding.
That's
I have
all.
learned so much. I'm going to go back and rewatch this a couple of times at least, because there's so much meat here, and I really think that, and I'm hoping that everybody who's listening, everybody who's watching, that you take something away from this, and maybe you could test these hypotheses for yourself.
Yeah.
That you can set an intention, impress your will, divest yourself or of thoughts that are contrary to what you want to, what you're willing to happen, and then also understand that, that there is a pragmatism to this, that this is, you call this magic for the rest of us, and I think that's really appropriate, because it's like, it's not magic for the shaman, it's not magic for the mystic, it's not magic for the magician, it's for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we harness the power of chaos to bring about a tangible, measurable, repeatable result? Anyway, that's where I'm stopping.
Yeah.
We could check comments if you like, but I'm like,
Yeah, we're good. I mean, we've gone for an hour and 40 minutes, and I'm getting hungry.
yeah, well, you got to eat, man.
So, but yeah, thanks for doing this episode. It's obviously something that I'm very passionate about, and
Yeah,
so I appreciate it.
cool, man. Well,
All right, why don't you lead us out?
cool. Thank you, everyone, for attending our TED Talk tonight. Thank you for growing in real time with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your comments, for your feedback, and thank you for taking time out of your Friday night, because Friday night is debauchery night.
Yeah.
And you've chosen to devote an hour and 40 minutes of this with us, and we are grateful. So we love you. And Aaron, I love you. And peace and hair grease.